great to be here in State College, Center County. Spent 4 good years here, and I'm excited about what we're announcing today and appearing with my running mate for the first time as we gear up for the fall election for governor. So I want to thank everybody for showing up today. Earlier this morning I was in Harrisburg talking about reform in the legislature, reform in Harrisburg, and changing the culture and changing the system up there that's broken. And the public is frustrated, and we heard about a report from the grand jury last week talking about recommendations for change. And I find it interesting that a lot of the recommendations for change were very similar to the list I put out last November. I released 8 policy papers for the primary, starting in November of a year ago. The first paper I released was on government reform. And in government reform, we're talking about basically changing the culture in Harrisburg and creating an environment in the Commonwealth so that the private sector will want to bring jobs back here and get the economy moving again, because this race is really about the economy and the jobs. But reform in Harrisburg is part of that, because we've got to have the public believing that we're spending our money wisely, that Harrisburg gets it, and that we learn to live within our means so that we can be competitive again. And in some of those reform measures that were released by the report last year that overlap with some of the ideas that I put out a few months ago, I talk about amending the Constitution and downsizing the legislature in size and in savings and cost, eliminating the per diems and the WAMs and the leadership slush fund accounts, and making sure that we look at campaign limits, matching the federal limits, and having an independent committee that actually will eliminate the gerrymandering of the legislative districts as we get ready for redistricting of the state. I also laid out a whole broad agenda of how I would change the budgetary process so we can get away from these delayed budgetary problems that we've had over the last 7 years. And as I looked at my reform package and looked at the overlap with the recommendation that came out of the grand jury report, it was amazing how common the recommendations were. And yes, I'm the only candidate in this race that actually has embraced almost all the recommendations exactly that came out of the grand jury report, because they're in my report. And the items that weren't in my report I'm willing to explore, as opposed to my opponent, Tom Corbett, has already rejected 2 of the main items that are in that report. And this is going to be a debate about where Commonwealth is headed. And I look forward to that debate. I look forward to having many debates with Tom on reform, on our views of how to turn the economy around, because I'm the only candidate in this race that has 2 things. One, I am a true outsider from Harrisburg, that I can actually come in from the outside and make the changes in the proposals as governor, and not tied to some of the benefits that are there, like my opponent. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm also the only candidate in this race that's actually governed. I'm running the 2nd largest county in the state, Allegheny County, in my 7th year. And yes, we reform government. I'm the only candidate that's actually taken on the status quo. We eliminated 10 elected offices and consolidated them into 4. And if you don't think that was hard, those 6 offices we got rid of were all held by Democrats, and I'm a Democrat. My own party fought me in my county on this issue, but I took it to the voters and had a 72% approval rating by the voters. I also took on some public safety victims where we had 5 911 centers, costing us $6 million extra a year. We consolidated the 5 and put them into 1. We now have a state-of-the-art 911 facility. We save $6 million a year, every single year. Those 2 consolidations combined almost $8 million savings per year. There's a track record that no one can match in this race for governor. And I took on the status quo, I took on my party, and I showed the way of how you do it. Ethics reform. As governor, I made it very clear that on day 1, I will sign an executive order. The executive order will put an outright ban on free gifts, meals, tickets, travel, entertainment, and any other perk in the executive branch. I can do that through executive order, and we'll do that on day 1. Then we'll work with the legislature through legislation. If you have a ban on it and a total zero tolerance level, you don't have to worry about the ethical problems that could possibly come from accepting a gift and questioning was it reasonable or not. Other reforms that I want to mention briefly, I do think it's important that we try to prevent fraud by strengthening the Office of Inspector General and putting the Inspector General inside every state agency, expanding the pipeline to encourage more diverse representation leadership, and strengthening the Sunshine Act and increasing penalties for violations of the Sunshine Act. But today, I'm here to talk about my running mate. And I'm excited about introducing him today and standing with him for the first time. We've talked many times, It was one of those strange elections where I couldn't really stand with them or congratulate them for a few days because of how close the race was. We had obviously 3 Democrats running for Lieutenant Governor, and they're winners with me today, and I couldn't be more pleased to be running with the gentleman I'm about to introduce. Somebody from Center County, somebody from this part of the state, which I think is a great balance. It brings a different perspective for me, even though I spent 4 years here. From the western part of the state, having someone from the center part of the state and dealing with a lot of issues that are very common to this part of the state, and recognizing that agriculture is still our #1 industry in Pennsylvania, and having somebody that served as a commissioner. I'm a county executive, which run a county government, somebody that's actually governed as a commissioner, and now is in the State House, and came in the 2006 wave on reform, and has introduced and sponsored many of the reform proposals that are currently in the House of Representatives. I couldn't think of a better person that will be there to help me push my agenda through the legislature, as he will preside over the Senate as the Lieutenant Governor. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce the next Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, my running mate, and somebody that we're going to be hooked at the hip for the next 5 months as we win this race. That's Scott Conklin. Scott, come on up.
I want to thank Dan, but most of all, we don't get any place by accident. The reason I want my family with me, because that's what we go into politics for. It's about our families, it's about our communities, it's about what we believe in. And that's why I'm fortunate to have a loving wife, Terry, and a son, Spencer, who have been supportive of not only what we're doing, but they love this state and our community as much as I do. When Dan Onorato won the nomination for governor, I was truly excited. Almost as excited as I was when I won the nomination for lieutenant governor. The reason I was excited is that Dan Onorato understands what it takes to run local government. Dan Onorato understands what it takes to run a city. But most of all, he understands what it takes to put services on the ground. He's the only one running that's actually done it. He's the only one running that knows that a bus line has to run on time, where the children and youth have to have the folks there to give the needs of those children. He's the only one that understands that a nursing home has to be run and it has to be taken over and properly funded so our seniors actually have the health care and the benefits they need. Dan Onorato understands all these things because he's balanced the budget. But most of all, when I went to Harrisburg in 2006, it was more than just about a pay raise. It was about reforming government. It was about bringing it back to the people that is far too far away. I'm proud to be part of that crew that did 31 reform measures, stopped the 2 a.m. voting, and now we actually have the best open records law in the state's ever had, and one of the best in the nation. But we have so much more to do. There's still reform measures left. As Dan was talking about, right in this building, I sat down with groups from across the state and we had a hearing on a constitutional convention. A constitutional convention to give fair redistricting, finance reform, and the things that make us proud of our governor again. Things that make us proud of our legislature. There used to be a time that when I was a young man, when a legislator went down the street, people respected him because they knew he was out to do the best for us. But sadly enough, many people have taken advantage of a system that was made, and it was made openly for legislators to do what they needed to do. But folks have taken advantage of that. And it can't be done through a prosecutory nature. It has to be done through a true leadership. And that's why I'm proud today to stand here with our next governor, Dan Onorato. Dan?